Hello friends, welcome to Hybrid Academy and to the third session of Learn Photography. In this course, we will learn how to capture perfect pictures, and in the third session, we will learn all about controlling motion and depth of field. Here's a small brief on Hybrid Academy imparting professional education. We have a thought to change billions of lives by providing professional education accessibly and affordably, to reskill and upskill the professional level of knowledge, to make continuous learning a part of life, and to make personalized education accessible. We focus on interactive education because it is engaging and better for learning. So please like, share and subscribe our channel so that every time you are notified whenever some new content is posted. We are eagerly looking forward to your support. So if we see in detail, in the third session, we will learn all about controlling motion via shutter speeds and controlling depth of field via apertures. After this, in the end, we will summarize everything we have learned and will know what we will learn in the next session. In case if you have queries or questions, please feel free to ask the same in the comment box. Now let's quickly start with our session. Why learn about controlling motion? So to answer this, learning about controlling motion will enable us to gain creative control on the picture we are clicking, expanding the potential of creativity. With this, it will also develop our confidence in the skills, delivering consistent results. With the help of controlling motion, camera can actually capture or freeze a motion taking place. Just to brief, if you look at the picture on the left, we see lot many streaks of lights. These streaks of lights represent moving vehicles on the road or the vehicles in motion. Just try to imagine these cars at one point with headlight on. You will feel like all the cars are parked on the road and not moving. So depending on the situation and requirement, we control the motion in our pictures. Going further, let's see why to learn about controlling depth of field. So by learning to control the depth of field, we actually add a lot of creativity and reality to our pictures. At times, we use this depth to control the exposure of our picture. For example, if you look at the picture on the left, the feet of the baby is in focus and the face is totally out of focus, like a real life vision, where with close-ups our eyes can only focus on one subject and the other objects around the picture automatically goes out of focus. This method is also helpful if you wish to highlight one object in focus. Now let's start with the shutter speed. Before shutter speed, let's first know the device we will use to capture pictures, the camera. Camera is an optical instrument for recording or capturing images, which may be stored locally, transmitted to another location, or both. In our cameras, we have two options for managing shutter. One is the shutter button, used to click the picture, that is to open and close the shutter, and the other is the shutter speed option, which controls how quickly the camera should open and then again close the shutter. Earlier, in reel cameras, the shutter was just in front of reel, and as soon as the shutter button was pressed, the shutter would open for the desired time and the light makes the image on the photo film via camera lens, which can later be developed as a photograph. In digital or DSLR camera, the shutter exposes the photosensitive sensor to the light via lens for the selected interval of time. This forms a digital image on the sensor, which is later saved in the memory card. So to understand the camera shutter in more detailed manner, the camera shutter controls the duration of light entering the camera and exposing the sensor. The length of time that the shutter is open is known as the shutter speed. For more light, the shutter will open for a longer duration. For less light, the shutter will open for a shorter duration. Lastly, as we know that time is measured in hours, minutes and seconds, the shutter speeds are measured in seconds and fractions of second, which means the shutter is also open for a duration which is less than a second. So in the next slide, let's see what all are the common shutter speeds used in photography. As discussed earlier, the shutter speed is measured in seconds or fractions of a second. So here you can see that the slowest shutter speed is 1/4 of a second and the highest is 8,000th part of a second. You can imagine how fast the shutter opens and closes to capture the perfect shot. Further, as cameras are available from various brands and companies, so each company provides their own standard of shutter speed. However, the basic remains the same. These days, advanced cameras also provide very low shutter speed up to 30 seconds to capture a photo in almost negligible light and very fast shutter speed up to 8,000th part of a second. In some cameras, the shutter speed is mentioned like fraction, whereas in some it is mentioned as the denominator only. DSLR cameras have digital display and show the selected shutter speeds in fractions as shown in the previous slide. This helps us to take a shot creatively as per our requirement. Further, let's see what motion is and how to capture it. We capture motion simply to convey that an object is moving. As I showed you before in the beginning, the motion or movement of subject can be creatively shown. So depending on the kind of photograph or depending upon the requirement, we show or do not show the movement in any photograph. In this slide, if you look at the picture, the bike is moving, but you can see it's still in one frame. And at one glance, no movement is observed. This is because the picture was taken at a very high shutter speed of 1/500, which means 500th section of a second. In the next slide, similar picture was taken at a low shutter speed of 1/30. Here, maybe the clarity of the picture is lost due to movement. However, motion is clearly visible that the bike has moved or displaced from one point to another in the time shutter opened and closed. Here, the motion of bike and biker is pretty dominant. In this slide, the shutter speed is again very high, that is 1/500. So we can see crystal clear water with drops splashing around the water fountain. Just imagine if the same picture is taken at a lower shutter speed, how the photo will look like. As discussed in the last slide, this water fountain is now shot at a lower shutter speed of 1/30, that is 30th section of a second. So in this picture you can see the water is looking milky and soft with almost negligible drops splashing around from the water. This picture clearly depicts that the water is flowing. So here are few sample pictures where a single frame of a moving object is captured at a high or very high shutter speed of a very small section of a second. Now these are some sample pictures where moving objects are captured at low shutter speeds, showing the object in movement due to series of frames captured. Now let's see another example where a single picture was captured 3 times at different shutter speeds. And you can clearly make out which one is taken at a low shutter speed and which one at a high shutter speed. Here we see another example of varied shutter speed giving different results. Now let's see how we can control the shutter speed. Different cameras have different options to control shutter speed. Some show the option as S, that is shutter, and some show it as TV, that is time value. With this mode, shutter speed can easily be controlled. Shutter speed can also be controlled in manual mode along with many other parameters of the picture. After selecting the shutter speed, that is S mode or TV mode, the shutter speed can be adjusted with a dial by upgrading or downgrading the speed. To click a picture at high shutter speed is comparatively easy as the shutter gets clicked in a small fraction of a second. So even if there is a shake in camera, it doesn't affect much on the picture. However, clicking on a low shutter speed where the shutter speed is almost 1 second or even more than that, taking a picture without a tripod is not suggested, as it will definitely cause a camera shake and will actually spoil the output of the camera. In such scenarios of low shutter speed, camera can be placed on a tripod and the click is done either by setting a timer or via remote to avoid the camera shake. Another tip to avoid camera shake is to hold the camera with both the hands and very near to your body so that both the elbows gets rested on your chest and stomach. Then hold your breath while clicking. This makes your body a stable tripod for clicks with average shutter speed up to half a second. Now let's learn about aperture, as in what is aperture and what is the use of aperture in comparison to a human eye. In a layman's language, aperture is basically the size of camera shutter hole to manage the amount of light hitting the camera sensor while capturing the picture. The smaller the hole, the lesser amount of light enters the camera. And the larger the hole, more light enters the camera, resulting in a huge variance in the picture. The concept of aperture evolved from the pupil of human eye, which automatically dilates to a larger size in low light, making the retina to get more amount of light. However, it contracts or undilates in bright light conditions, blocking the extra light to reach the retina. In similarity to human eye, aperture in the camera lens also controls the size of the hole to accordingly control the amount of light falling on the camera sensor. For low light conditions, bigger aperture hole is opted, and for good amount of light conditions, smaller aperture hole is opted. The size of aperture hole in the lens is controlled with the help of aperture blades. To measure the size of the hole and to manage the functionality, apertures are expressed as f numbers or f-stops in various cameras, where f stands for focal. Every lens has different aperture size range available and can be managed under the aperture mode or manual mode. As discussed earlier, the aperture of every camera lens is expressed in the form of f-stops or f-numbers. These numbers are inversely in relation to the aperture hole size, which means the bigger the f-number, the smaller the aperture hole size, and the smaller the f-number, the bigger the aperture hole size. F-numbers also affect another aspect of a photograph, that is the depth of field. However, this works in proportion with the f-number, which means with a smaller f-number, the lesser is the depth of the field. However, with the larger f-number, the depth of field is also larger or deeper. We will discuss the depth of field in more detail in future slides. In camera, the aperture appears with the f numbers like f1.3 or f5.6, etc., and can also be seen in the viewfinder while setting up the focus. These can be increased or decreased based on the type of lens being used for taking the picture. Usually, prime lenses provide a large range of aperture, and lenses providing lower f number values are costlier than the ones providing higher f number values. Going forward, let's understand the depth of field. To define this, the depth of field is the distance between the nearest and the farthest object or element in a scene that appear to be sharp in an image. This distance allows us to set our focus in our photograph to one object near or far and making the other object out of focus. Now, when we understand the depth of field, let's understand shallow depth of field and wide depth of field. Shallow depth of field is achieved by shooting photographs with lower f numbers or f-stops, which range from f1.4 to about f5.6 to let in more light. This puts the plane of focus between a few inches to a few feet. Depending on the subject and the area of focus point, we can blur the foreground or background of the image. For example, if we analyze the pictures on the right, the first one has the wine glass in focus, with lights in the background completely out of focus. This makes the main object stand out of the rest unwanted objects. In the second image, the focus is on the second bulb lamp, which makes the first and the other lamps out of focus. The key here is to set the right focus point, and due to shallow depth of field, objects at other distance plane automatically go out of focus. Next is the deep or wide depth of field. A wide depth of field means having a larger area in focus, as it keeps more area of the image as sharp and clear. It is sometimes referred to a large depth of field or deep depth of field because it has a large area of view in focus. Wide depth of field are best for landscape and architectural photography. In order to capture such sharpness for the whole image, narrow or small aperture with higher f number or f-stop should be used. For example, the picture on the right are shot with the aperture value of 32, which is a large f number or f-stop, resulting to get every element of the photograph in crisp focus. Now let's see a practical example of this with a varied depth of field. Let's assume we have 6 persons standing in a queue and a photographer is trying to capture the photograph of the queue from the front. If the photographer clicks the picture with the aperture f2.8 and focuses on the first person, all the persons standing behind him would be out of focus. Now let's assume the photographer changes the aperture to f4, which is larger the number than the previous setting. This will result in first 2 persons to be in focus and the last 4 to be still in out of focus. Further, let's assume that the photographer keeps on changing and increasing the aperture value. The higher the aperture value or the f number, more people in the queue come in focus, and more subjects keep on adding to be in focus. So now you understand that what role the aperture plays in composing a photograph and how it completely changes the output delivered. So far we have learned that using aperture, we can adjust the amount of light falling on the camera sensor. We can adjust the depth of field and we can even do change of focus, as we saw earlier in the bulb picture, in which we had focus on the second light bulb. But how to do it? Here in this picture we see that the photographer is using aperture as f f2.8 and is focusing on the first person, which results in making the rest of the queue members out of focus. Let's see if the photographer focuses on the second person with the same aperture of f2.8. Complete focus goes on the second person and the rest go out of focus. This can be done with each of the queue member keeping him or her in focus and the rest automatically go out of focus. So now we learn that at a lesser f value and a higher aperture, we can shift focus in the same picture composition, giving different results. Different cameras have different options to control aperture. Some show the option as A, that is aperture, and some show the option as AV, that is aperture value. With this mode, aperture can easily be controlled. Aperture can also be controlled in manual mode along with many other parameters of the picture. Depending on the camera and after selecting the aperture mode, that is A, or aperture value mode, that is AV, the aperture can be adjusted with the dial by upgrading or downgrading the value. Aperture can also be adjusted dynamically while framing, composing, or shooting a picture. To do this, just press the dedicated aperture button on the camera and while holding it pressed, adjust the value with the dial by upgrading or downgrading. Today in lesson 3, we have learned controlling motion via shutter speeds and controlling depth of field via apertures. This will definitely build up confidence in terms of skills and knowledge of photography and will make you more versed with the vocabulary we use in photography. Going forward, we will learn a lot about photography. Going forward, in the next session, we will learn about the composition of a photograph, along with exploring the subject and scene, and will also learn a few compositional techniques to improve the final shot. We will add a few new words to our photographic vocabulary in relation to photograph composition. Thank you for joining the complete session. Please share and subscribe our channel so that your friends also get benefited with the information, acquire free knowledge and learn new things. We are eagerly looking forward to your support.